Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I'm your co host, Jocelyn Turner. It's a beautiful day here in Northeast Florida, and we are happy to have a very hearty discussion about one of my favorite topics, Dr. Kane, and that is drumroll obesity, breaking down the weight of the issue. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kane?
I'm doing fine. You know, Tyrone tried to steal your thunder. He just started talking about what the weight of the thing is. So he used that line already, so we won't go down. But I'm doing absolutely fine. It is a great day in Northeast Florida. It's on the chilly side, but that's still better than being 102 degrees that we have experienced in Florida and Texas. Right now, Texas is experiencing extreme. In the summer, all this heat, and then in the winter, you got all this cold, and you'll see why I'm referring to Texas in a minute when we introduce one of our guests. I'm very happy to have, I have to mention myself, very happy to have Dr. Wesley Mills, great colleague, member of the Northeast Florida Medical Society. He has a very successful family practice here in Jacksonville. He's been doing quite well, and I am very proud to say that he is helping to continue the pioneering efforts at taking care of African Americans, particularly here in Duval County.
Dr. Mills, did you pay him to say all of that wonderful stuff about you?
Listen, I'll give him a little bit after the talk. After I put it on my tab.
Yeah, there you go. and Dr. Well, she told me not to call her doctor, but Miss Melina, who can give you her credentials, she told me not to say the same thing about her, but I will. I've looked at her resume, and she is impressive in terms of what she has done and what she is doing. And I believe it's in Texas. That's why I brought up Texas. Yep. Okay, in the weather in Texas. And I am so happy to have both of them on board this evening because I expect this is going to be a great show.
Yeah, you're right, Dr. Kane. Thank you and welcome, Yamilet. Yeah. Hopefully I said it right, Melina and Dr. Wesley Mills. We are super excited to have you both join us on the discussion about, again, obesity. I have to say it again because I actually like it. Breaking down the weight, WEIGHT, of the issue. So we're happy to have this discussion and look forward to a real good conversation. And to our listeners, don't forget to post questions of our guests and make comments. Actually, what are your struggles with weight? And, have you seen that as a trend in your family? Whatever your thoughts are. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Mills.
Wait, before you do that, JT, let me have Tyrone put up some quick. I just got 2 slides. The first one is on the current statistics of obesity in the U.S. Just for people to be able to follow. Dr. Mills may want to talk about it in his presentation. Tyrone, can you put that up? He's muted, but I presume he's saying yes. He'll put it up. But anyway, go ahead, Wesley. I'm sorry. He'll bring that on in.
So you guys, we see a lot. Oh, go ahead, Jocelyn. I don't know what you guys want me.
I wasn't sure. I was gonna. The question that I was posing is, from a primary care perspective, how do you define and diagnose obesity?
So, we've all been trained to look at BMI, but I try to not just use BMI because there's so many other factors. The BMI doesn't necessarily take into account like your muscle mass or your body type. It's literally just height and weight. I mean, it's a simple mathematical equation. So while we use that as a guide, it's not the end all be all. So I try to tell people not to just stick, if your BMI is over 25 and you feel like you look good and you're percent body fat is great. Don't worry about your BMI, or even if it is above that level, that is just not the end all be all. I mean, it's just another measurement that we use. And I don't know how Dr. Melina feels on that one, but what do you tell your patients about that?
Yeah, it really is actually an outdated system because it doesn't accurately measure health. So BMI was something that was established like years and years and years ago. It's not something that has been updated recently. So we don't really, well, it sucks for insurance purposes if you're getting medical treatment through your insurance. Like they will ask you for BMI just to cover you, but it really isn't an accurate indicator of health. So.
And also, I think about as you were mentioning that, I remember when I was in college, and even professionally, athletes used to say, but my muscle mass is different, and it's, or either my friends would say I'm big boned it. I love how people say I'm big boned it, and thought that contributed to their BMI.
Most people bones are about the same, but I'm not sure. I know the phrase as well, but it is true though. I mean, so if you have and like I said, the majority of people aren't built like this, but say you have a pro football player who's 5'10" and they're 2 or 3% body fat, but they have all this muscle mass. They're gonna be, their BMI is gonna be above 25, but they're in better shape than 99% of the people in the United States. So another reason why, again, BMI is not the end all be all. Just like Miss Melina said.
And that's what they said about Michael. If you recall, when Michael Jordan was listed as being obese, Michael Jordan, give me a break. I mean, in the midst of in his prime of his career, they called him obese. And I'd be like, where?
So,
right.
Dr. Mills,
2% body fat.
Yeah, Dr. Mills, how do you approach obesity as a chronic disease rather than a lifestyle issue?
I try to talk about it because all these things are related. When we talk about diabetes or hypertension or hyperlipidemia or heart disease, I mean, it's all related. So we try to just not just say, I try to, when I'm talking to patients, we try to basically just kind of just include it, make it all inclusive. So you kind of understand like, okay, so we're talking about your cholesterol and your diabetes, but your weight has a lot to do with this as well. And so it's, like I said, it's not just one thing. We try to include it all together. So people can understand, and so the patients understand, like, we want you to lose weight, but it's not just so you just look better. It's because we want your cholesterol to be better, we want your blood pressure to be better, we want your blood sugar to be better, because all these things will lead to increased mortality and decreased morbidity. So we want you to do better. So it's just basically so you can live healthier. So it's, again, why we're not just focusing on your weight or your BMI. It's about just a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, so many people.
Go ahead, Wesley, I'm a simpleton in the group. So when you start talking, I kind of explain something. Morbidity means being sick and the illness associated with it. Mortality means dead. Death.
Dead, right? Exactly. Yeah. So we want you to live longer and be healthier. Basically, that's what we're saying. Right. Live longer, be healthier. That's it.
Right. Okay.
So Yamilet, in a lot of cultures, being thicker is accepted. And also, some folk are looking at younger people anyway. They're looking at the social media influencers who talk about having more, a little thickness here and there. How do you help people to understand the difference between that and really being what a healthy weight might or should be?
Right. So one of the things that I always talk about when I see my clients is like healthy weight or being healthy, first of all, is subjective. So really when if somebody's presenting and they're saying they're struggling with their weight and they're struggling with their eating, the first thing I want to look at, what is their relationship with food and what is their relationship with their body? So when we terms of like our relationship with food, are you using food to cope with anxiety, trauma, stress, worry, uncertainty? Are you using food as a source of comfort? A lot of times that tends to be what people do. And it's a coping skill, but it's not a coping skill that is going to help serve them in the long term in terms of their health and their goals. So when we talk about even what just healthy is, like we really try to break it down for each individual person. Like, what is it that you want from your life that we can do in our work together to get you there? So really just looking at their relationship with food, their relationship with their bodies. Comparison is a big one. Like you said, social media. We always talk about it's somebody's highlight reel, right? Like we're not posting the sad stuff. We're not posting our frustrations and our worries. It really is just a highlight reel. So a lot of the times too, even with social media, we are unfollowing accounts that causes us stress. We're really trying to filter what messages that we're getting, because a lot of times these messages that we are getting are false, and they're like a result from diet culture or even just like disordered eating in general. So it gets really, really complex, but it really just depends on each individual person.
And forgive me, because I forgot to ask you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Dr. Kane gave Dr. Mills all of his, glory in terms of who he is and what he does. But introduce yourself to our audience, please, and your background.
Hi, I'm Yamilet, and I am a mental health therapist licensed in Texas, and I have a practice. It's called YM Counseling Services, and it's just me and my practice, but we specialize in working with eating disorders and eating disorders in athletes as well. So I work with a variety of people who struggle with like binge eating, anorexia, bulimia, a lot of people who struggle with their body image, self-esteem, self-worth, all of that stuff, and anxiety around food in general. So that's a bit of what I do.
So do you find that, thank you. And wow, what an exciting practice. And the fact that you're doing this on your own. And I did cheat. I looked you up a little bit. So you were a former athlete. And so did you have any particular struggles with your weight that made you decide to go this route? Or is it because you saw friends or other athletes, once they transition from that lifestyle to then being more sedentary?
Right. So all of the above. So I was in dance, and I did that all the way throughout college. I was on a dance team at my university, and I was in a very aesthetic sport. So weight mattered. Our body image mattered. And if you didn't meet the weight requirement or didn't look good in the uniform, you were sat out. You were not going to be in uniform. You weren't going to perform. And that really takes a toll when you enter the program at 18 and your body changes a lot, and you're 20, 21, try to figure out how to cope with the world. And I know I coped with the world by eating. And so obviously my body changed, and that was really hard. And then transitioning out of your sport, it's another world, because now your relationship with exercise changes, your relationship with food changes, and it's really hard to cope with those changes as well. And I think a lot, especially for a lot of athletes, your self-worth is really tied to the way that you look. So when that changes, you start to struggle with like depression and anxiety, and you start to become really insecure. So all of that, fed into what I do now and what I specialize in.
That's awesome. And Dr. Mills, I think you also have, you work with athletes. Do you find that, or are any of your patients who were former athletes struggling with their weight and now leading into some of those diseases that you mentioned a few minutes ago?
I have. So since I do a lot of sports medicine, I see the good thing with like some of my football players, they seem to have trimmed down actually. And I think it's just become from necessity because, they already have a lot of, after playing in the NFL or even just college, you have a lot of joint issues, and the heavier you are, the more those issues seem to bother your hips, your knees, your back. So a lot of them seem to trim down. And that does seem to significantly help some of those joint issues. But they're still there, but it seems to significantly help. So I see it more on that end with the athletes who are kind of retiring, that they're literally trying to lose weight versus that they're so the weight seems to come down, because I think some of them probably were having difficulty maintaining the weight anyway, because sometimes it's hard to keep your weight up at that level.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I remember one of the problems we used to have, I don't know, 20 years ago, give or take. We had a problem with those athletes, professional athletes, when they retired, because they were eating so heavily. You look at Barkley and Shaq,
Yep.
and how once they retired and started just doing a TV show, they still kept eating the same amount of calories that they would run out on the court and burn like it was nothing. And they kept eating, and I think that may be representative of what some of us do. Sometimes when we were younger, we could eat that stuff. I used to be able to go to McDonald's. I hate to say that word, but I used to go to McDonald's and eat 2 quarter pounder with cheese and the whole, 2 meals of quarter pounder. Didn't gain an ounce, but I smell it right now, and I gained maybe 6 pounds.
But I
that,
think
that
about.
definitely happens.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Mills.
No, I was gonna say that definitely happens, and I think that sometimes happens to us when we go to college as well. Like we were super active in high school, and for us who don't go and play, intercollegiate sports or anything else, but you're doing 2 or 3 sports in high school, and then you go to college, and you're just going to class, but we eat the same, so you don't burn the same calories. You're not
Oh, yeah.
practicing, so you gain weight. So yeah, it happens even earlier on, even than that.
I think I was the healthiest when I arrived at the University of Florida. I was one size, but by the time I left, I was half the woman that I went there because I was walking. I seemed to be more active because it is a huge campus. Unfortunately, Dr. Mills, though, so many people are struggling with their blood pressure, their cholesterol, and diabetes. How do you have that conversation to help people to understand that the association, if you will, between being overweight and obese and those chronic health conditions?
Well, we kind of talk about like for diabetes, your diet contributes to so many things we're talking about. So if you're eating too many carbs or bread, starches, pasta, sodas, that kind of stuff, it's going to cause your blood sugars to be elevated, which then can lead to diabetes. But at the same time, when you're eating all those things, they're pretty high in calories, which can cause you to gain weight, which can then cause your blood pressure to increase. And if you're eating some of these things along with some fried foods or other foods we shouldn't be eating that are high in saturated fat, now your cholesterol's high. So it's like a multifactorial thing, and it's just one thing kind of leads to the other. And the majority, and this is another thing I talk to my patients about a lot. When we're stressed, like Miss Molina said, most of the time we do one of 2 things. Barely anyone eats normal. Either you overeat or you just don't eat very much at all. So some people either just lose their appetite, but a lot of people just overeat, and that's just it's for comfort. And Lord knows everybody's stressed these days, so that happens a lot more. And so we see a lot more of this happening. So it's just there's so many different causes, and I know Dr. Kane sees this all the time as well. That you can't just talk about diabetes without talking about exercising and eating correctly. And now the majority of people have multiple medical conditions, and they're all related. So if you have diabetes, you probably have high blood pressure, probably have high cholesterol. And if you don't, we're trying to make sure that you don't develop it, because it's probably likely somewhere in the background.
Yeah, it's hard to even when you talk about that, Dr. Mill. I was going to say when you say, well, Dr. King running through that quite a bit. The other things are other comorbidities, as they call them, other diseases and issues that come along with the obesity. Is the joint pains, the knees, the low back pain, sleep apnea, the cardiovascular disease. I mean, where people having heart attacks and so on and so on and so on, mainly because of what you mentioned just now.
So, Yamilet, what strategies do you recommend to help patients build a healthier relationship with food and exercise?
Yeah, one of the things that I see when people come to me is they've been prescribed weight loss. Like, I got to lose weight, but nobody really tells them how to actually do that.
Yeah.
And like what tends to happen is people go on the extreme end. They start restricting. They're eating 1,200 calories a day. They're exercising a lot, and then they burn themselves out, and they go from restriction and they go to the opposite end. And then they say, like, they forget everything, and then they overeat. And restriction is actually one of the highest reasons for binge eating, for emotional eating, when we are restricting. So really, when I first start working with clients, we're even just seeing, like, what are your patterns of day? Are we saving our calories for nighttime? And If so, how do we spread that out throughout the day? Because like if you are restricting in the morning and you are restricting during lunch and you're not really having any snacks in between, you're gonna overeat at night because your body is just so physically hungry. It needs to kind of balance itself out. So that's the first thing we got to look at. Like, what are the eating patterns here? And then even the next layer of this is learning how to eat a little bit more mindfully and learning to eat a little bit more intuitively. So really just when we are eating, really trying to engage in the moment. Like, okay, am I distracted? Am I watching TV and just like mindlessly eating and I'm not even aware of like if I'm full, if I'm hungry, my hunger cues, right? So we're really trying to get people to start to listen to their bodies a little bit more and what they're actually really needing in that moment. So they can consume foods that do also give them enjoyment without that restriction. Because like I said, like restriction is going to be the main cause for a binge or for like emotional eating a lot later.
Do you tend to start with have a conversation with them to ask about their relationship with food? You know, when do they tend to eat the most, or do they eat alone, overeat alone, or with other people? Do you take it from that point first? Because to me, it does have a lot to do with psychological or mental health issues related to, than anything else, other than food is just delicious.
Yeah, there is so many layers to this. Yeah, and food is fantastic, and we don't want people to never to not have a cookie again, right? Like that's not the goal.
Right.
But we really are looking at like what is those patterns like. The reality is a lot of people who do struggle with overeating, binge eating, they are eating in secret because there is so much shame. They find that their triggers are sometimes at nighttime when they have like anxiety, when they're by themselves, when they're nervous, when they're stressed. So all of those things are really actually important to look at as we work together. I always like to say, it's never one issue. There's always like 20 things that we have to look at and really address to see overall improvement. And but I think our like society really likes to say, obesity and like weight gain, that's all willpower. And if you just cut your calories, you're good to go. Well, if it was that simple, I wouldn't have a job, and neither would a lot of other people in this profession. So it's not that simple.
I would either.
Yeah, that's so true. But you know what though? People this past Christmas, I can say it, and I'm not throwing shade at the people who did, but people gave me boxes of candy. I'm like, why would you bring that to me when you know I'm gonna eat it? So what I've been doing, sorry for folks who I regifted it to, I've been giving it away. Right? It's like, come on, you have to think about that in terms of as we got past the holiday and then my birthday was 2 days ago and Valentine's Day is coming up. I think people food is associated with holidays and special occasions. For my birthday, my friends said, where are we going out to eat? We're not. I wanted to do something different and to challenge one another to do something different. If you're tuning in, we're talking about obesity. It's a struggle for myself as well as so many people. Chime in, tell us what your thoughts are. I think Dr. Kane wanted to share some slides. Tyrone, if you would, go ahead and show those.
All I really wanted to show on this slide pretty much is that, the prevalence of the presence, and for simpletons like me, the presence of obesity in the United States, okay? If you look at the ages, what you can do is 20 to 39, 40% of the people are obese. 40 to 59, 44%. And then 60 to 42, 60 or greater is 42.8%. Get a little slight drop, probably because people like myself and others, some of my patients who come to see me, start preaching to them about obesity and the issues associated with obesity. So we got a little slight drop, but still, essentially, what we can see is that, a little less than half of the people in the United States are considered to be obese. If you look at it by sex, men are about 40% obese. That's their beer gut, pot belly, liquor butt gut, whatever. Women about 41.9%. They're pretty much equal. If you look at race and ethnicity, You have non-Hispanic Black adults at 49%. Okay, just round it off, say 50% of Black folks, and then 45% of Hispanics are considered to be obese. And then, of course, it goes down somewhat with white adults, non-Hispanic white adults at 42.2%. And then Asians, and maybe one of you guys might want to allude, talk about that. But Asians only have about 17.4%. What's up with that? Anybody?
Yeah, I was going to
Miss Melina. That's amazing. I didn't even realize that statistic. The 17.4% that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask as a follow-up to that is what role does genetics and metabolic factors play in obesity, and how do they influence treatment plans, Dr. Mills?
Well, genetics definitely does play a role in a lot of these things, you guys, but I still feel like lifestyle is a huge factor in the majority of these things. Again, some of us, we'll have patients, and I know Dr. Kane can tell you the same. We'll have patients who eat horribly and their cholesterol is phenomenal, but that's just not the majority of people. The majority of people, it's diet, it's lifestyle, and occasionally we'll see people who eat really well and you do labs on them, they're diabetic or pre-diabetic and they have high cholesterol and you wouldn't even expect it. So sometimes those are the times when the genetics plays a role. But the majority of the time we can really do a lot to offset even those when we have issues with our genetics. It makes you maybe more likely to get it. Doesn't mean you have to have this or develop these conditions if we can do things to offset it, like we're talking about, like eating, as well as you can, or making sure you're keeping your weight down and exercising as consistently.
Well, let me put this part into it. One of the reasons that we tend to, that I look at it in terms of the Asians and the difference between Asians and others, is actually the diet, is truth be told, because we tend, a lot of us eat out. I mean, sugar is the ultimate criminal in the United States. High fructose corn syrup, the degree of sugar in our diet is just ridiculous. And because you're taking in those carbs and what the role that carbs play in providing energy and metabolism and stuff of that nature, I think much of that difference, I'm not saying all of it, but much of that difference may not just be genetic. It's probably because of the kind of food that we consume, and not stereotyping people. A lot of times Asians eat different kinds of food than, say, that a good old Southern diet, especially that some of us grew up with, based on your age, that Southern diet, and or just in these days and times, I mentioned McDonald's early, and they are the bearer of bad news as far as it comes to dietary intake. But that goes for Chick-fil-A, that goes for, I can call that name because is my show. That goes for Chick-fil-A and some of the other fast food restaurants and stuff of that nature. You may see quite a bit of that difference being explained by the intake of sugars and carbs that is part of the American diet.
So, just thinking about both Dr. Mills and Ms. Molina, how can healthcare providers, counselors, and trainers work together to create a comprehensive obesity treatment plan? And that's for both of you.
On my end, what we know, so we're focusing on, maybe dietary and lifestyle changes. We may add medications, but I'm not a dietitian. So I would say, listen, while I know about, nutrition and everything, I'm not the specialist. So I would send somebody to see a dietitian or nutritionist. Same thing if we need to talk to somebody about, they have like a, body dysmorphic syndrome, or they're having issues with disordered eating, I'd send them to see somebody like Miss Molina, who's an expert on those subjects. Like I said, just like we send them to specialists if they have, a cardiac condition or endocrine condition, I'd send them with one of these specialists who could help. So it's a more, it's a team, a team effect, and that's how we'd work with this out.
Let me phrase it a little different than how I see it, and Miss Molina, I want you to respond on it. I'm like Dr. Wells, we're primary care physician, we're family practice, we're a whole lot of hats.
Dr. Mills.
A whole lot of hats. And what we like to do is take those hats off and handle them off to people that do a better job at it than we can. I'm not as good a dietitian as one of our favorite dietitians that we have, Linda, Ms. Turner, as you know. It's just not my area of expertise. I'm a jack of all trades, I'm a master of none, you know, and so I try to encompass and utilize those guys who have that expertise like Miss Melina and use them for what their expertise are to enhance the program that we're trying to put together for this patient to lose the weight.
Thank you.
I would definitely say I rarely ever work alone. So my treatment plan with my clients is working with another registered dietitian that specializes in eating disorders and disordered eating and body image issues. So it's really important for providers to be aware of those specialties, because like when we don't have the training in that, we can unintentionally be giving our clients misinformation. So if you're not trained in disordered eating or eating disorders, what can happen is sometimes we can fall into diet culture because we have our own biases as people. We all do. And the reality is we need to know what can trigger emotional eating, binge eating, overeating, lifestyle. We need to also be aware of the best way to implement lifestyle changes. So the problem with diet culture that we see right now is diet culture. One, it's $1 billion industry that tries to sell you the idea that if you're thin, your life is going to be so much better. The reality is diet culture tries to sell you quick fixes. What's the fastest way that we can lose weight? What tends to happen with that, one, 95% of diets fail, so it doesn't work in the long term. And two, whenever we do lose a lot of that weight, it becomes really obsessive. Now, all I'm thinking about is what I'm going to put in my body. I can no longer engage in social activities because like I'm scared about not being able to control what I can eat for dinner. I'm like having so much anxiety about taking my kid to go to a birthday party because I might eat cake, and that's just going to be completely ruin my whole diet plan. And now I'm going to go into a binge because I had one piece of cake. Well, screw it. Now I can get some pizza and I can go to McDonald's. I can go to Chick-fil-A. I can go to Taco Bell, right? Because I already messed up. So these are all things that are really important to that we need to be able to talk about with our clients. And that's why it's really important that if you are on a journey where you are wanting to change your lifestyle, like really, really, really prioritize working with clinicians that are familiar with disordered eating, body image issues, because we don't want to fall into that trap, because then, now we're going to have a new set of problems with anxiety and obsessions. And that's also not a really great way to live either. So it's a delicate act for sure.
Quick response to the person that asked, how do we get here with sugar? Did I miss a protest of America when manufacturers started adding more sugar and salt? No, you did not. But, what happened was there was a battle going back and forth as which is the best way, one, to lose weight. But before we got to that, back in 1960s, Senator McGovern was commissioned by whomever the president was at that time to look at weight, because there was such a panic about Americans becoming obese. They looked into weight and they started looking at the best way to lose weight and yada yada yada. And so obviously, and just a long story, a shortcut to the story, the sugar industry got involved because they did not want to lose their revenue. And so there was a whole lot of misconception and misproposals, whatever you want to call it, in terms of the healthiness and benefits of sugar, but they really went after fat and saying that it is the culprit for heart disease. It is the culprit for obesity. That fats are the culprit for all of this stuff, totally ignoring the role that sugars played or carbs played with regard to obesity and your health, period. They didn't, all the cause of cardiac disease was basically placed off on lipids, which that is not the case, okay, as we realize these days. So just for the person that asked that question, historically, it was about this. The same thing what Wesley paid me to talk about him when I first got on the podcast. That's what that was all about.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. Each week we feature a moment in about something regarding the topic. We used to say a history maker moment, but it's just our moment relative to this subject. So for our guests, don't go anywhere, get a drink of water or what have you. We're going to pause for a minute, and Tyrone will cue up our moment, our pause for the moment.
A shifting landscape. Obesity then and now. In the 1970s, the African American community faced a different health landscape. Obesity rates were lower than they are today. Communities were often built for walking. Fresh food was a common part of many diets. Fast food was a treat, not a daily habit. Today, the picture is starkly different. Obesity rates have skyrocketed in the African American community. This change reflects a complex interplay of factors. We must understand these factors to address this pressing health crisis. The consequences of this obesity epidemic are significant. Conditions like heart disease, stroke, and diabetes are on the rise. These chronic illnesses impact life expectancy and overall well-being. We must act to reverse this trend and empower healthier lives. The African American community has a rich history of resilience and strength. By understanding the factors driving obesity, we can develop culturally relevant solutions. Together, we can work towards a healthier future for African Americans. Several societal shifts contribute to rising obesity rates. One significant factor is the increased availability and affordability of processed foods. These foods are often high in calories, sugar, and unhealthy fats. Another factor is the decline in physical activity. Many jobs are now sedentary, requiring long hours sitting at desks. Neighborhoods may lack safe spaces for walking, running, or playing. Marketing also plays a role. Fast food and sugary drink companies often target their advertising towards communities of color. This targeted marketing can normalize unhealthy eating habits. Economic disparities also contribute. Fresh fruits, vegetables, and lean protein can be expensive. This makes it harder for some families to afford healthy diets. Addressing these societal factors is crucial to creating a healthier future. While obesity rates have increased across all ethnicities, disparities persist. African Americans and Hispanic Americans experience higher rates of obesity compared to white Americans. These disparities are linked to systemic factors. Socioeconomic factors such as poverty and access to health care play a role. Communities of color may have limited access to grocery stores with fresh produce. They may also face barriers to quality health care, including preventative care and obesity management programs. Cultural factors also contribute. Traditional diets can be high in fat and sodium, reflecting cultural preferences and historical food practices. These dietary patterns can contribute to weight gain over time. Addressing these disparities requires a multifaceted approach. This includes addressing social determinants of health, such as poverty and access to health care. It also involves promoting culturally sensitive health education and interventions.
Dr. Mills, I have to bring up the subject that we haven't talked about yet. And I started to sing the jingle, but I'm not going to promote one of those drugs over the others. But this time, I'll just say, this time of year, the commercials, it's the beginning of the year. People make resolutions. And a lot of folks are turning to Manjaro, Ozempic, and some of those other medications. How do you help your patients make the choice of getting on one of the injectables? That's what I call them, or
Mhm.
maybe the old uh, programs like Weight Watchers or Nutrisystem or Jenny Craig.
The thing, Jocelyn, now all those programs are starting to turn to these medications too. So if you look at Weight Watchers, they're doing these injectables, and I mean, it's like everyone's doing it. You can't, everywhere you look on television now, you see either commercials from the company themselves with Wegovy or Zepbound, if we're talking about the weight loss versions,
Hmm.
or you'll see something on Row or, Weight Watchers. So I'm a huge proponent of, helping my patients if they want to lose weight, because we were doing it before, but we didn't have great tools because, people would try to use Adipex or Phentermine, but we'd worry about, your blood pressure going up, your heart rate going up, causing other issues with, you know,
Vascular
GI
disease.
issues and dry mouth and all kind. Yeah, exactly. And they had to stop some of them, like the Fen-Phens,
Right.
which is probably a little bit before my time. But
Not
so
mine.
these are much safer, because again, these are just diabetic medications. Like Dr. King and I've been writing these medications for a while. We've been writing Ozempic and Manjaro and Trulicity and Bydureon and Victoza. These newer ones just have better weight loss, numbers. So, but the problem is the majority of insurances don't cover these for weight loss. Like I have maybe 10 to 20%. I mean, 15, 20% is probably pushing it of my patients whose insurance will cover it for weight loss. Diabetes, is not such an issue because obviously they're diabetic medications first. But when it's just for indicated for weight loss, it's a lot harder, which is why you see people going to a lot of the weight loss clinics and, or med spas because they can use the compounding pharmacy it's still not cheap, but it's less expensive than the brand. But these medications are easily $1,000 to $1,500 per month, which is problematic if your insurance doesn't cover it. So
We
So if
are
they,
looking at doing that next week. We're going to get more detail in terms of those
okay,
particular weight loss drugs. I'm not dismissing. You can say whatever you want to about Dr. Mills at this point. I'm just letting Jocelyn reminding her that we're going to get in more details in terms of discussion next week because there are more than you still have people that fall back on non GLP-1s and GIPs, the GIPs,
hmm
none those drugs that they fall back on in terms of weight management. However, I agree with Dr. Mills. I mean, these things can be really expensive. And even though you go into a compounding formula, a compounding place for those drugs, they compound off label away from the actual promoters like Eli Lilly and the other guys.
and Novo.
Even though we're looking at getting those drugs from those sources, here's a caveat to it, and a lot of people don't realize. Reason that these guys are able to compound those drugs, and we can get into more next week. The reason they're able to compound those drugs is because there's a law that's, and I can't quote the exact statute, but
Yeah.
there's a law that says whenever a drug is unavailable, an emergency mechanism, like what we did with COVID, the emergency mechanism will be to alleviate the patent approach to those providing the drugs. But as soon as that urgency is over,
Yep.
no more of those weight loss drugs. So now I'm looking down the road. If I'm looking at people who are losing weight, and we can get, like I said, get into it more next week. For those people who are actually losing weight on those drugs, they may get cut off. There's a potential that those compounding formulas, by way of the compounding industry, may get cut off. Then what we do for those
Yeah.
who
so with that said, how can the healthcare system better address obesity prevention, especially in underserved communities?
Man, it's difficult. I mean, it's like I said, this is things I mean, the first thing is just, we always talk about primary prevention. It's just access to healthcare. I mean, if you don't have any access to healthcare, this is a non-starter. I mean, because if by the time we see them, they already have diabetes and have hypertension and high cholesterol, they've had a heart attack. It's hard for us to do anything. I mean, we still obviously we're going to do what we can, but it's much harder to, you know, to prevent, well, I mean, it's much easier to prevent something from happening than to treat it. So we much rather prevent it than treat it.
Right.
But like you said, if you're in like a place where you don't have very good access to healthcare,
food deserts, not to mention food deserts.
Food deserts, all that happens all the time. You go some places where there's no viable grocery store there. All you see are fast food spots, and not even the healthy fast food spots. It's just, we see it all over the place, and it's just one of those things. And it's like, man, what do we? And it's hard to fight against, because we have, as physicians and mental health professionals and healthcare advocates, sometimes we're just at a loss because we don't know what to do, because again, we can't make a grocery store pop up here, or we can't get healthier restaurants or things. So it's hard sometimes.
I can't pay for your GLP-1s. I can't pay for your drugs out of my pocket.
Right.
Even though I know what to do to help you lose the weight, but I can't pay for it. Not for everybody.
So, how do you address the mental health impacts of weight loss, plateaus, or setbacks?
One of the things, and this is I think very controversial to a lot of people, but I don't focus on weight loss because we can't sometimes always guarantee it. What we try to do is really look at what you value, what is behind the weight loss. And a lot of times I find that people are like, oh, I really want to be able to keep up with my grandkids, or, I want to go hike this mountain and not feel completely out of breath, right? Or I just want to be able to walk to the mailbox and not feel like I'm dying, right? So I'm really trying to look at more of the values of the person. And then, okay, what are some skills now that we can actually implement every single day to help you get to that goal? If you have a goal of a number, we cannot guarantee that you're going to hit that number. It's just the reality, right? There's so many factors that go into weight loss. People just say it's calories in and calories out, and that's not. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have a problem. But that's just not the reality, right? So weight loss is really, or the number in my work with my clients is really not priority, unless it's some crazy thing where if I need this surgery and I have to weigh this because of insurance, which has happened before, and that's another topic. But that really isn't the focus. The focus is, okay, how do we make long-lasting change? Because again, a lot of times when we try to lose weight super quickly, it's not long-lasting. It's not a lifestyle change. We're engaging in behaviors that doesn't allow us to live our life. If we go on vacation, everything that we worked so hard for completely just goes out the window. So it really is how can we make sustainable habits that you can have for the rest of your life that still allows you to be able to live your life?
Do you incorporate fitness programming in addition to the psychological aspects or the mental health part of weight loss?
I definitely, I don't give specific plans of this is what we're going to do. But yes, a lot of times, a lot of my clients tend to value movement and they want to engage in it. And what's kind of funny is when we think of exercising, we think, okay, let's run and let's walk. And those are the two things that everyone just always thinks of. And that's not the truth, right? What are even just maybe some things that bring you joy? Is it dancing? Is it walking your dog around, the neighborhood if you have access to be
riding my bike?
Right. So really any type of movement, and our work is good movement that feels good, movement that isn't going to harm you. And that is always going to be priority. And then, after you're set in a set routine, then maybe if you want to add something here and there, we work up to that, right? But we really want to avoid burning people out at the beginning. And I think this is why New Year's resolutions fail, because we go hard January 1st, and by March we're burnt out. We're done. We're not doing it anymore.
March. You went a long
February.
Yeah.
2 weeks in.
We're done. It's too much. We burn out
tomorrow.
Yeah, those people who lose weight to get in an outfit or for a special occasion coming up, rather than looking at it as a lifestyle change. I think those are one, And, you know, I called that as you were talking, I was thinking about it's the all or nothing. People just have that mindset of all or nothing when it comes to weight loss and fitness goals. Do you see that? Do all of you see that a lot?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, all the time. And that's why you try to talk. And just like Ms. Molina said, I try to talk to patients. Like I'll ask them because when we're talking about weight loss and these medications, I always ask them what their goal is, but I try to also tell them, like, listen, we're not focusing on BMI. We just want you to feel healthy, feel better, because the only thing that and doesn't concern me, but just like we had with all these weight loss medications, it's almost artificial because of course you're on the medications to make you not hungry. But the problem is, and you don't have all these cravings, but when you stop the medication, your appetite comes back. So the key is being able to maintain this. So unless you're doing these, and this is what I preach to them all the time, I'll put you on these medications and it's going to help, like turbo boost. However, if you're not doing the right things in the meantime, like if you're not building these healthy habits, once we stop the medication, you're going to gain all this weight back and probably then some, which is not what you want. You don't want to be yo-yoing around. I mean, you don't want to start off at 200, get down to 170, stop the medicine, now you're 210.
Right.
And so that's what we don't want to, and that's what happens a lot. And I used to see it with Adipex and Phentermine, and it's not going to be any different with these medications. Yeah. And so, exactly. So that's the only thing because sometimes, like, as we talked about, these medications are so expensive, sometimes it's hard for people to be on them for a long time, whether it be the brand or a compound, whatever it is we're talking about.
And mentioning since you said that, somebody asked the question, did you misspeak when you said 1,000 to 1,500 per month?
Not at all. No, that's exactly how much they cost. Yeah, the brand, the semaglutide / Wegovy is probably starting at about 1,000. But again, as Dr. King will tell you, they go up as the dose goes up. As the strength goes up, they go up. The tirzepatide / Zepbound's a little bit more expensive. And again, it goes up as the dose goes up. So, I mean, you could be spending easily $1,400 a month for this. And so it's very expensive. And even like we said, even with the compounds, I mean, it's still maybe a third or a half, but these are still expensive. And we're still talking about $300 to $600 a month. So none of the stuff is inexpensive. It's very expensive. So, like I said, they work, but they're expensive.
So what do you see as the most promising developments in obesity treatment and prevention?
Next week.
At the teaser for next week. It's really just these new medications. I mean, they really do help. And again, like I said, these are great for so many different things, and they're finding new indications. But we'll talk about this more next week. But they're finding new indications and new benefits that we didn't even realize that these medications do. But again, that'll be a teaser for next week.
Exactly.
Teaser.
You're absolutely correct. That's people just don't realize what these medications mean beyond just weight loss.
Okay? Exactly.
And that will be part of next week. By the way, I just did the calculation. If you paid that $1,200 a month, that's $14,500 a year.
Wow.
And I'll tell you guys real quickly. So I have a patient, several patients who are over at Mayo, and and I'm sure they're doing it. I just want to just say it only happens at Mayo, but what's happening is I think some of the plans are saying, listen, you can either have bariatric surgery, and this is how much that costs, or you can be on these medications, and this is how much you can spend. So you can't be on these things in perpetuity. You have $20,000. If you want to be on one of these medications, this is how much you have, and you have this many months to use it. So I think, again, most people are not going to be able to be on these medications forever, even if their insurance covers it, because they're very expensive. So
and that also,
something to throw out there.
You brought up another point, Dr. Mills, in terms of the surgery, which we will kind of discuss some of that in terms of the therapy next week. But you brought up the surgery, and then now you got to do the comparison of which surgery works.
Yep, exactly.
And how does it match up against the GLP-1s and
medications,
those other medications? How do they match up against it? And it's a very convoluted and complex subject matter, and that's why I hate to separate these things by a week.
And I think it's even important to add that these things, they're not a fix. They're an aid.
Not permanent.
So the minute, if we don't address the other things that are going on, we rebound. And that's a lot of what people don't really understand when they are getting consultations for surgery, or they're getting on these GLP-1s and on Ozempic and everything. It's an aid, but if we don't do the stuff, if we don't process the stuff that's underneath it, you know, the minute it goes away, we fluctuate. We're going to rebound, and that's also a really hard reality for a lot of people to cope with.
So was Zepbound a play on words, or was Zepbound where Zepbound come from? Rebound?
Rebound.
Hey,
So
Tirzepatide and bound.
Yeah. Rebound.
Rebound to Zepatide.
So Yamilet, how important is accountability in creating long-term change, and how do you help clients stay motivated?
Motivation. This is what I tell people. Motivation, we cannot rely on motivation. Motivation comes and goes. And if we rely on motivation, we're never going to get to our goals, right? So we have to, when we think about even just accountability, we really have to ask ourselves, like, again, like I focus on values. Like, what is it that we value? What is important to you? And I kind of keep just bringing that up every single time I meet with clients. And I find if their motivation like weans off a little bit, like bringing them back to what motivates them. The reality is that there are different like stages of change that clients enter like therapy with. And if they're not really wanting to change their habits or wanting that long lasting change, like we as providers can't want it for them. Yeah. So it's, you know, I give you all I can, you give me all you can, and we work together to get you to your goals. But accountability is really important, and we can't just solely rely on motivation. And if we do, we're going to end up really disappointed because we're not always motivated. Like when we think about even just going to work, I'm not motivated to go to work every single day, but I do because I gotta pay my bills, right? Right. It's like that same kind of idea. If I just wait till I'm motivated, it isn't gonna always just happen like that. So
or you be out of a job. Go ahead.
Do you all then, and to that point, do you encourage your patients or clients to bring other family member support systems with them to their appointments to help them on their journey to getting healthier?
It really depends on each client. Sometimes, like, unfortunately, there are clients that just don't have that strong of a support system, and we, you know, we work with what we got. There are a lot of times though where clients do have a really strong support system and a family system, especially if I see minors, like the family needs to really be included. But it really is, if assuming the people are adults, it really is up to that individual client if they want to let their support system in or not. But it is really helpful for, you know, even just like partners and family members to really know how to support that person in helping to keep them accountable.
So for your profession, Yamilet, I know we know when it comes to these guys in terms of primary care physicians, if people have insurance, they can go to them. But for your profession, does insurance companies pay for your services, or do people have to talk about paying out of pocket? Do they have to pay for out of pocket to come and see you?
Whew, that is a very complex question. So insurance is a little bit of a hassle because they can just deny left and right, and they can audit you. In order for insurance to cover services, you have to prove that your services are medically necessary. So sometimes providers have a really hard time with like diagnosing clients, because then insurance companies will have that diagnosis and it's just there and it's no longer that confidential. You can find providers who are in network with your insurance. Not every single provider is in network with insurance, just because a lot of times there is so many hoops that you have to go through. But you definitely can, if there does have to be that research. And unfortunately, that is a limitation in our field, is insurance companies and having to.
Like another conversation for a future. Looks like this
is a big conversation for sure. That is a really big conversation.
Well, this has been a very interesting topic. As you know, that we only literally touched the surface. There's so much more. The topic of obesity is very complex. And we certainly have enjoyed your insight and surely welcome you to come back next week as we continue the discussion. At the end of each show, we do like to give our guests an opportunity to share your final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion. So, Dr. Mills, I'm going to start with you. What are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic?
The key is really just to, yeah, like I said, we want everything to be. I want people to focus too much on these numbers, your absolute weight, your BMI. It's just we want everybody to be healthy, and so try to exercise, try to eat as healthy as you can, and if you do these things, your weight will probably you'll lose weight. But again, it's not all about the weight in general. It's just trying to be healthy and just trying to just like we said, we want you to live longer and live healthier. That's really the bottom line.
Thank you. Yamilet, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are this is a very complicated topic, and weight loss, weight gain, these are all very intricate things. And if you're feeling like hopeless and you're feeling frustrated and you're feeling really confused by the messages that you're receiving because they're conflicting, know that you're like not alone in this, and you might need that extra support of therapy, of working with a registered dietitian to help even just learn how to cope with the emotional sides of things, to gain more information on like what foods to actually be able to put on my plate that would help satisfy me. What coping skills can I use that will help me be able to live the lifestyle that I want that doesn't always involve food? So it is a very complicated topic, and there's not just one answer to fix everything. There isn't one way to fix it, right? I say that in quotations. There's not one way to work with this. There are many different ways, and it really is tailored to you. So don't be afraid to reach out for support.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to thank both of our guests for being here. You guys were very enlightening. We all kind of were in agreement with each other. We're on the same train because we experience the same thing in terms of dealing with our patients and the issues that they have to go through in terms of trying to help them remedy their health problems, not just what they look like in a size 7 dress or size 17 dress. It's more about for us. I mean, and I think Dr. Mills is in agreement with me, as well as Ms. Molina. We're all in agreement. It's about the health of the individual first and foremost. And then after that, then if you want to look at the appearance and all that other stuff, that's fine. But it's about the health and the health aspect as it relates to obesity. I think, Dr. Molina, Ms. Molina, she told me not to call her Dr. Molina. That's what I feel. But Ms. Molina is right on point, and that is, there are a lot of psychological issues that confront patients and people, not just patients, but people that have obesity, and trying to remedy that problem is nothing that you can just take a pill for, take a shot for, and think it's all over. Okay, Dr. Mills mentioned that as well, because he knows that when you run out of your $1,500 a month, you're going to be right back to see us, and we got to figure out what to do next and where to go from there. So before we wait until you run out of your $1,500 a month, we try to figure out what is this journey going to look like, and try to forecast it, futuristically in terms of the actions, as Ms. Molina said, the actions we need to take to help us remedy and find a dietary solution to much of the problem. With that being said, I want to make sure two things. One, you guys know that this podcast will be available on the website after about 24 to 48 hours, so that if you want to use it for any purposes that you want, feel free. Okay. Two, both of you guys are invited to come back next week at your leisure. It's up to you guys. We will have a pharmacist expert, and we're also just kind of looking at a dietitian, because as we all know, it is not just pharmacology. It is not just psychotherapy. It is not just Dr. Kane or Dr. Wells giving you a pat on the back and say, this is what you can do. I think you can do it. And Ms. Molina saying, we got other concerns that we may need to address before we dwell too far into weight being the issue. So you guys are more than happy. We're more than happy to invite you guys back next week because it can carry on a full discussion. We could have did this for 3 to 4 hours. Obviously, I don't want to, but we could have done this for 3 to 4 hours and still barely touch the surface. Yeah. So feel free at the invite for next week. Just let us know, and we'll make sure everybody get their invite back into the program, and we'll go from there. And Dr. Mills, I want to make sure you failed to mention that you have started that journey of doing a weight loss clinic, okay? And I don't think it's just because, and you can clarify if I'm mistaken, I don't think it's just because you want to hop on the bandwagon for, monies and stuff. It is something that's actually needed in primary care practices, but I'll let you make that statement for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we just did it. I got my wife. She does healthcare administration, and so I still have my own practice. But we decided we'd start this because I have, like I was telling Dr. Kane earlier, we have so many patients come to me every single day who want to start these medications, and they just can't because barely anybody's insurance covers it. And so the only route we had at this point was basically the med spas and weight loss clinics, and I just told Stacey, I think we can help out in this space. And like Dr. Kane said, we have to figure out, what they're going to be doing with the compounding pharmacy, what things are on the shortage list and everything else. But that's a whole other issue. But yeah, and so we just started seeing patients last week. And so, I told him, I can teach you guys, I tell my wife all the time, I couldn't keep her under butter, so I had to put her to work. So this was a good thing.
Boy, you said that on air.
I'm just kidding. She knows I'm joking all the time.
Yeah.
But this, we just thought it'd be really good because it's something, and we plan to add other services, but this was one thing we wanted to start with. And this is, like she's very, she's very not adamant, but she's very not concerned about weight loss and everything, but she's really, really likes this field. And I think it's going to be good because we really want to help people lose weight because we see how happy the people are when they're starting to lose weight. We just want to be able to make sure we're getting with Miss Molina and other folks so they can maintain the weight loss that they're receiving from these medications.
Well, let me put it another way. Some of these patients are going to go and get that stuff done anyway. Now I got to clean up the mess that it makes, make. So I might as well try to do it myself. I'm just speaking from your standpoint. Might as well try to do it myself so I can have more control over the whole process to assist that patient in making sure that they achieve their goals and the goals that we would like to have for
them. Very well
thank
said.
you. Thank you, Dr. Mills, not Dr. Wells, as Dr. Kane kept saying. Dr. Mills.
It's Wesley Mills,
Oh, yeah, and the whole partner was Wells. Sorry.
And Miss Molina, thank you so much for being our guest. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pause for the Truth. Today, we had an incredible conversation with Dr. Mills and Miss Molina about obesity, its far-reaching consequences, and the innovative approaches to treatment and prevention. We learned about obesity as a chronic disease and how it impacts not just physical health, but mental and emotional well-being. Dr. Mills provided valuable insights into the medical aspects, including the role of GLP-1 receptor antagonists in managing obesity, while Ms. Molina helped us explore the mental health challenges, the power of behavior change, and the importance of a compassionate whole person approach to health. One key takeaway is that addressing obesity requires a combination of science, empathy, and collaboration. It's not just about weight. It's about improving overall well-being and breaking down barriers like stigma and accessibility. As we move forward, let's remember to support those on their health journeys and advocate for better education, resources, and care for everyone. And join us next week as we continue the topic of obesity, bringing in more experts, because we did learn this evening that, as we said, this is more than just one person, one-dimensional in terms of one part of the medical team, a healthcare team, helping individuals with their weight loss. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, or whatever all those terms are, because I never get it right. And tune in next week to Pause for the Truth. Good evening.
Now you see why you need to tune in every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's been an absolute joy having you with us today on Pause for the Truth. Dr. Rogers Kane and Ms. Jocelyn Turner are so grateful for your time and support. We know you have a lot of choices, and we're thrilled you chose to spend your time with us. It means the world to us. A shout out to Tyrone Jackson of Call Tyrone IT Services for making everything run smoothly behind the scenes. Tyrone, you're truly a whiz. Remember, folks, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with more insights, stories, and truths. So mark your calendars, set those reminders, and join us for another exciting episode. Thank you once again. And we can't wait to connect with you next week. Stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay tuned. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, link with us on LinkedIn, and most of all, subscribe to us on YouTube.